This
is
the
Bhangra Podcast.
Sup, y'all, and welcome to another episode of the Bhangra Podcast. Today, we are talking to the judges of Bhangra City 2022, Sumit, HK, Simran, Jasmit. The last judge was Gurbaksh, but he didn't respond. Now, I know a lot of y'all are here mainly to hear about the tamasha that happened that weekend, and we do address it just later in the episode. And I want to make one thing very clear. We are covering Bhangra City, not the Bhangra World Cup. The Bhangra World Cup was a separate competition run by a completely separate group of people with a separate judges panel. And I tried to hit them up. I reached out to all of them, but I got left on red. So I tried. Nonetheless, I do hope that this podcast does answer a lot of the questions y'all have about the competition. Also, one thing before we begin, I do want to shout out all the Patreon supporters that we have. With enough supporters, I'm really hoping to be able to hire an editor and get more podcasts out to you more quickly rather than just whenever I have free time to edit episodes. So if you want to see more Bhangra content from us, be sure to support us on Patreon at the link. I think it's there, might be down there. Anyways, let's get into the episode.
Hey guys, my name is Jasmit.
Hey, my name is Simran.
What's going on, everybody? My name is Sumit.
Yeah, and HK is also here. So so before we get into everything, I know listeners might probably be tuning in for whatever the tamasha was happening. We will get to that at some point, and the judges can say whatever they feel comfortable saying. But first, I do want to talk about the actual competition, dancing, and everything like that. So first off and foremost, we're gonna go over the rubric. And yeah, so I'm going to give a quick rundown of the rubric. So first, 5 points goes to the opening, 5 points to Vardia, and just general appearance. Choreo is a section of 30 points, and the way it was broken down was 5 points were given to just making sure that each routine had Shikke, Kunde, Tamal, Jogni, Chumar, Lodi, Fumania, and Joria. 10 points were proper use of folk instruments. 10 points were given to are the segments executed well? Do the moves correspond correctly to the segments? The next 5 points were is there a creative element to the routine? So that was all 30 points of choreography. 20 points for the formations. So the 10 points were are the formations creative and distinct? And 10 points were the formations smooth and clean. 15 points total for energy and nakra, and that's subdivided into 10 points. Did the dancers show consistent energy? 5 points for expressive throughout the set, 10 points for sync and uniformity, and then 15 points for ending / overall, which was divided into like 5 points for mix, 5 points for outro, and then 5 points for like lasting impression. So to the judges, whenever y'all were talking and creating this rubric, what was the the goal of the rubric? What was the goal of the competition? What were the performances that you guys and directors were trying to see?
Well, I don't think we got the chance to create the rubric. It was more so made first, and then we had to apply ourselves to that. But from what I see, the theme of the competition was folk with an edge, right? So how do you emphasize that, right? You have to look at choreography, execution. Maybe you're going to value execution a little more than choreography, or when it comes to choreography, how do you gauge, does it apply to folk with an edge, right? Like, how do you gauge if this choreo is folk enough? That's like the long question everybody's been asking all these years, right? But I think that, you know, the rubric values that, and it doesn't put points towards useless shit, how most rubrics usually have. And it more so just gets straight to the point and identifies, 5 points, or sorry, I don't have it on me, but like whatever points it is towards choreo, whatever points it is towards opening, ending, all that stuff. But
Yeah, and I think one of the main things that this comp kind of catered to, which other comps don't, is they tried to have a balance of everything. Whereas it's like that's a traditional comp or that's a modern gimmicky comp. They wanted a little bit of everything. And what we told each team, because one thing that we were always asked was, how are you guys going to judge us if all the teams come with great execution and, think and stuff? And it was just what your team identity is. You can hit all the points in the rubric, but do you have a team identity, something that still sets you apart, even though you're just doing traditional Bhangra?
Y'all were talking when we were talking earlier. You guys talked about dropping first and dropping the highest point, the lowest score for each judge? What was the rationale behind that?
So pretty much the way we did it is we did it two ways. Like first we just did complete total, so all five judges, and then averaged it by five to see what the plates come out as. And then we dropped the highest and lowest to rule out any not really biases, but everyone kind of judges on a different scale, right? Some judge really high, some judge really, really low. So it was kind of to take out the top and lowest and to just get whatever's in the middle. And then we averaged those by three to see if anything changes. Both ways the postings were the same, so it didn't make a whole lot of a difference, but it's kind of just to see what comes out of it.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on it as well. So initially we were saying averages, just keep all scores, right? That's essentially how we usually do it. But I believe historically the committee always drops the highest and lowest score. So that's essentially the route we went with. So we calculated it for ourselves in terms of all five scores across the board, and then the scores that were actually supposed to be used or was used was the highest and lowest scores were dropped.
Got you. Okay. Cool. And did y'all have a chance to deliberate generally?
So we kind of started like the discussion started about deliberations, but the comp pretty much told us that they wanted us to go based completely off of scores. So no deliberation.
Because prior to the competition, we had told the teams in the judges meeting it was gonna be points only, right? Zero deliberation. We thought about it, but it wouldn't be fair, so we stuck to points only. And what you see, the placings was done by points, with high and low dropped. But with the high and being low dropped, it was still the same either way.
All right. So why don't we just overall conversation from everybody? How did the third place conversation go about then? Whoever wants to start, go for it.
For junior or senior?
Let's start with the juniors.
It was close. I mean, in terms of just what the discussion was, a lot of it was just around essentially going back and tying ourselves back to the rubric, right? So I think what a lot of people miss or misunderstand is that they think as judges we're coming in and we're bringing our experience to the table. We're bringing our experience as in terms of what we see visually, but in terms of what we are having to do, it all ties back to the rubric. So a lot of it was just really was just discussion, just around what that placing was and our why behind it. I think a lot of people, we know what we're looking at, but when you know the why behind our reasoning, et cetera, it kind of solidifies it. But for the most part, and just me, Simran and HK, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but for the most part, our scores essentially were the same for all judges across the board. Generally close, but it was the same. Like we all had the same vision in terms of first, second, and third.
Okay. So seems like it was a relatively easy, like short conversation then.
Definitely not easy. This. I will say that it was very close, and this is I personally, I think all of us, we've judged a lot of different comps. This was a very difficult comp to judge. I will say that. It usually, you see a team, clearly, bum, 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 first, second, third, you can lay it out. This was very, very difficult to kind of parse out because the teams were honestly really good, both categories.
And because juniors only had 5 teams, it wasn't entirely impossible to weed out which ones were the worst ones. Like as soon as the show started, we were enjoying it, right? The first 2 performances were amazing. You guys remember the little kids, right? They killed it, right? But as we went on, that's when we saw Chernia, we all we all decided that's the first place team right there, and that was pretty much across the boards. Our points reflect that. The girls, they killed it, and then I think shortly after was ABC, right? I think they were one of the last teams in the juniors category, and they also brought an all girls team, right? And they were also really good. So then the conversation, between myself, kind of began like which team was better for me. And if you look at my score sheet, ABC and Chernia were pretty close. If you look at the master sheet, right, they were what, a point three difference, right, something like that. But they were both some really good teams, and it was hard. So we ultimately decided that Chernia is going to get first, and then points wise, ABC second, Shawnee first. So
So so like I see that it is extremely close with Shania and ABC for the junior section. What exactly, like, based on of what you saw, what was pushing Shania above ABC?
The
Um, I'd say
Yeah, I don't have my
yeah, my
notes with me,
rubrics are
but,
here.
for me, it was specifically if you go again, going back to the rubrics of dancing, the cleanliness, the Bhangra, right? The base of Bhangra was just executed. I don't even wanna say better because these teams were so damn good. Those girls, they ripped the patch. I don't know how else to say it, but in terms of, like, the rubric and the execution in terms of what that Bhangra piece looked like, they for me, that was at a higher level. They danced more elite in terms of that.
Even for myself, like Shania only beat ABC by 1 point. And that 1 point where they got it, where ABC wasn't, it was formations, creativity and formations. So it's such a small minor thing, but it like that 1 point puts you above, right? You're so close. Yeah. And honestly, ABC brought a first place set as well. Like it's not to say that their set was a second place set. It was very good. So it just goes to show the level of
Yeah.
competition that even juniors brought.
We did not look like that.
You
We
don't
did
know.
not look like that when we were
Tell
juniors.
you
We did not look like that when we were juniors, I'll tell you that right now.
you get fed at like the age of 5.
Man, our Brooklyn crews were a setup. It was a scam growing up.
For the seniors team, I know there were many more teams that were competing. So the whole list of teams that competed, and like in no particular order. So we have Chhatrapati Jalani, Shana Punjab, Royal Rockers, Rangla Punjab, Van City, Nam Pangra, Young Pangra, Anki Shakeen, Ashke Folk Arts, NPBA, and Malawa Folk Arts. Um, so long competition, many different teams, a whole long day, just generally, good God, that's like 17, what? Like 5, 7, yeah, like 17, 18 teams. Good Lord. Bless your souls. So third place, Royal Rockers got third. What was that conversation like? What was one? What did Royal Rockers do that kind of kept them above Nam Bhangra, Van City, or Dangala Punjab? Because they were extremely close. They were like 2 point, and Young Bhangra. They were like a 2 point difference between all those teams. So what was that? What was going on there?
I could take this one. So for as we looked at it and we discussed it as well, we're talking about what Royal brought to the table. They brought a sense of engagement. They brought a sense of X factors throughout their sets. That was like on a consistent basis, right? And it was a constant hit, 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 kept going, kept going, kept going. Um, as mentioned earlier too, yes, they were a little bit more sloppy, right? Uh, One thing that did pull them back, you can say, between the placings or moving up the ranks. For me, when I was looking at it, was that sense of dancing as a unit. They got this little dude in red. I want to buy them. I want to kidnap him. I want to take him home. The kid is crazy wrong, right? But now you have to remember when you're a coach and you're a team and you're moving in that dynamic, you have to remember that if that kid is crazy wrong, the rest of the teams the rest of the dancers have to keep up to par with him, right? It has to be all the way through. Otherwise, what you have is you have one person standing out, which was the case here, and he was kind of stealing the show. And then you have dancers in the back kind of taking breaks, things of that nature. So that unit piece that we were talking about, they didn't move as a unit as good as they could have. And then there's a portion on the rubric as well that's rotation of dancers. You got to rotate, got to rotate. They did a good job rotating for the most part, but they could have done better, if that makes sense. That's where Shanne kind of took that second place, is that they moved as a unit. But then again, the difference there is what kind of a set you're bringing. Are you bringing those X factors? Shanne had a great X factor, as Jasmit mentioned in the opening. And then after that, it kind of died down right throughout the set. Really good set, really clean set. But I feel like those dancers, they're really experienced dancers. I've been watching these guys for a long time. They can definitely up their game now. It really takes some more risk.
All right. So we kind of did talk about second place and Shaneb being above Royal Rockers, and it seemed really close. I mean, like, it was 1 point, and you guys. But for Charudi, I mean, Charudi straight up like smacked everybody. It seems like they were almost 7 points above everybody else.
It sounds so horrible when you say it smacked the shit out of everybody. Hard to follow up that question there. Lali, you want to go ahead?
Sure. Honestly, I think when CJ went on stage, like it's shown in the points as well. First to second is like I think a solid 5 to 6 point difference. And then after that, it's all like 1.5, 2 points. They just brought a set that was really refreshing. Like they literally had just what the competition was looking for. It was Bhangra with an edge. They didn't lose traditionality. They didn't step away from execution, and they didn't, do a gimmick but risk losing points in terms of like how they're doing their Bhangra or if they're standing around for too long. Everything was just made in such a smart way where it just worked. And I mean, the one thing that I've been hearing about Jardbi is they did have a Shika drop, and kind of how can you place a team first when you touch the shikha multiple times with your feet, which I completely get. Out here in Canada, we're taught to mathardik our shikha, like it's a big deal. But when you look at the points, even after deductions, like I did deduct for that shikha drop, and I deducted again for them not recovering from it very quick. But even after deductions, when you add all of our sports together, they're still first place. And as we mentioned in the beginning, there was like the comp didn't want deliberation. Everything went off points only. So they were the clear cut winner. We couldn't even deliberate them down even if we wanted
Hmm.
to.
So yeah, I know that there were some complaints that Jardly touched their feet, touched the props with their feet. But f- generally the comments I've been hearing that Jardly was like amazing and like that X factor bugger with an edge. Can you give me some examples of what that particularly means to you guys? And how did that put them above everybody else? Like, was it just solely
Honestly,
execution? Was it like a set design thing? Like, what was going on?
I think their set was not only like, of course, their set was good. It was choreographed very well, but even the dancers themselves, they had so much charisma together. They had so much stage presence. Like everyone was having fun. They knew just when to use Nakra, when to use grace. No one overdid it. No one outshined the other. It was just like when you were watching, it felt like you were actually watching a team. And to go back to how we started, we told each team, what's your team identity? How are you going to display that on stage? And I think they did. They came as a unit and it looked like they were all in it together. Even that Shika drop, you could tell the team was working together to try and manage not stepping on it. They were communicating in a way where it was like, okay, I'm going to go over this way, you go over that way. Like, and I think it just worked out for them, even with a mistake that big. They set themselves apart.
Oh yeah. Just to follow up on that, like that's essentially it. Was we're talking about the X factor. It's really what they're doing that stands out, right? What is your, again, going back to the rubric? What is your team identity? And that was the piece they brought to the table. They didn't bring somebody else's style. They brought what they bring to the table, and they kept it full. They kept their base live, right? They kept their base. Bhangra was there. Bhangra was executed, right? In terms of like, the Shik obviously being there, I know Sook on like a personal level, etc. And I told him afterwards too, I said, hey man, like your dancers got to get their IQ up. Like you got to have dancers that there was multiple opportunities for those that didn't watch the video yet, multiple opportunities that Shika could have gotten picked up and moved. Not to say like, obviously when you're dancing, when you're in it, it's very different than when you're spectating. But I was like, hey man, you gotta press on that, right? Like, but that again is like a future forward thing. That's feedback for them to just continuously improve. Other than that, after we deducted points, they were still rocking it up here. Small things that they did really stood out.
All right, just means you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I was just taking a look at my CJ rubric, and they almost hit every category with full points, right? I think the biggest thing that they had for me was the whole cohesive aspect, right? Um, their transitions were really good. Their intro was phenomenal. Their ending was phenomenal. They left a really good lasting impression. And just these things like build up, right? They start adding up, and they start to form like, okay, you know what, this really is the first place that, like, it's not even a question, right? Um, there's the question about the Shika, right? But I think with everything that happened, not only did they still, so like they locked the Shika, right? So you're gonna take points off for that. You have to, right? And even after taking points off, they still supersede other teams, right? However, even though they did, La Kashika, they did dance well around it. And like Summit said, like they did have multiple opportunities to pick it up. And even if they didn't, they still dance pretty good. Like they make up for it in other categories, right? Like I love their choreo. Their choreo was amazing. Their formations, I believe they had this one segment. I wouldn't even call it a gimmick, right? It's when they sat on each other's backs, right? And that's when the shit went flying off the stage, right? Um, that aside from the shit that segment itself was very impactful and it left a lasting impression. If you look at the other teams that performed that day, they were really more cookie cutter sets, if that makes sense. You've got the Midla intro, you've got the sub segment, Kunda segment, and then you've got, them hitting all the different categories on the rubric. And it was just like a gig set kind of, right? And Chardi actually looked like a proper executed like set. And I don't know how to describe it, but it was really good. And they just outshined other teams. But I will say there's this one team that I forgot the name. You guys might remind me, but their segments was just atrocious, right? It was like a 2 minute sub segment, 2 minute drummer. I think you guys know which team I'm talking about, right? And then it was like just a 2 minute ending, no remixing or anything, just like song after song after song. And it looked like a Midla performance, right? And that's just to show like a little bit more contrast as to like why Jardi's set is a lot better than the other teams that performed that day. But they came from out of state. They came from out of country actually. So they showed their value, and I think they did well, and they deserve first place.
Before we move on, are there any just like there's a lot of teams of this competition? Is there anything you just generally you guys wanted to talk about in terms of the performances, what you saw, what you liked, what you didn't like?
One thing sorry, go ahead.
I thought there's a girls team. There's a girls, yeah, a girls team called Not Bhangra that performed that night. Uh, those girls killed it. I actually thought that like they would have ended up in like placing somewhere, but unfortunately, once the numbers came out, they didn't. I was like, where did Nam go? But it's an amazing up and coming team. Like those girls are really good.
Yeah, and to add into what HK said, even Shania and ABC, like honestly, after years of not having a solid girls team in the circuit that's just killing it, to go to a comp and see like four girls teams that are just back to back to back, it was great. Like it's so nice to see and it's so refreshing to see that girls are picking it up and they're up there now.
Yeah, I'll say one thing I didn't really like seeing was it was very clear because you could hear it in the mix, you could see it in the set, was more so just like copy, like literally segments copied from other teams. Like I remember I saw NJFL from Boston. Was it Boston? It was one of the NJFL sets, right? They had no, it was the last one they went to. Was it Legacy? Legacy, yeah. They had a segment where they go from Sialkoti into Tamal, right? Not only did a team copy that exact segment, they copied the exact songs, the timings, the moves. It was just that you could hear it. Everybody knows which segment it is. And then every team also had like a medley at the start. It was just like it's not fun, man. Come on, like if you want to do a medley, do something like unique with. I think one of the girls, I think was it Shernia that had a medley at the start, where they did like a cool stunt or two. It might have been them, or it might have been it was one of the girls' teams. It might have been them, yeah. But they actually had a really good medley. Um, I want to see more like innovation in the circuit, not just the circuit, but like the teams we saw that day. Um, seeing like Shana's intro, seeing Jardi's intro, I prefer those a little more, and that sort of set the tone for the rest of the set. If you see a shitty intro, you're like, is this team even interesting, right? Um, but yeah, everything did.
Um, three things I really want to see in the circuit. One is there is no goddamn excuse for people not to be able to type a go. There's no excuse for your Torla to just be flopping and to be flimsy at this point. YouTube has 100 videos. It takes 1 weekend to sit down and figure it out, right? So for that part, like if you're preparing for a competition, right, you're doing all this preparation. Guardia and your Torle and things of that nature is part of that, right? So that's definitely something I want to see is people taking the time out to to learn. A lot of people shy away from it because they're like, "Hey, I'm gonna get stuck doing fuck up, right? Or I'm gonna get stuck doing this." But you have like 2, 3 guys on your team that could do it. I guarantee you it's gonna save a lot of hassle and time, right? The other thing is there was a big, big variation in mixes. Please get your mix equalized. Please get them like set up. There was like some mixes, all we heard was bass. There was some mixes that were super low, but with the teams that had their mixes equalized and done right, it sounded crazy. I had a copy on my table, and I was watching the team, and there was so much bass that my copy flipped off the table. Like that's what I want to. That's what I want to feel. That's what I want to hear when I see this mix. And the mix was fire, like badass mix, right? So those two things for sure. And the third thing is I would love to see a little bit more complexity in formations. That would be like the third piece of it. I think dancing wise, everybody can dance, right? Go back to your roots, bring that base foundation, just challenge yourselves a little bit more. And if you're getting through the set and you can still breathe, you're getting through the set and you're not passed out on the floor, you can probably keep pushing that notch higher and higher and higher. A lot of these dancers are really good. Just I want to see the challenges. I want to see a little bit more complexity, and stuff.
I agree. All right. So shifting over. So just for anybody who is completely unaware, or maybe people like a few weeks or months or listening or watching this later on, Bhangra World Cup happened the night before Bhangra City, and the commotion that happened from that competition seemed to have leaked into the next day. Bhangra City was in the same general area as Bhangra World Cup, and a lot of the teams that competed at Bhangra World Cup also competed at Bhangra City. Um, I'm just going to let you guys talk about whatever you're comfortable with, if you want to talk about it at all. Like, if you don't want to, like, literally no big deal. I don't care. But like, whatever you want to do, go for it.
So I will say this: we don't know as much as the committee, right? As soon as we got there, we were locked in a little room, and then we left after everybody already left, right? Um, we didn't do placings. That's one thing that did happen, but that was more so just a result of everything that's happened before. We were told all these different things, some teams hitting other teams. This is all just word of mouth, so we can't really confirm nor deny anything. We don't want to spread any rumors, but we were there to judge. We judged. If you guys want to bring your bullshit in from other competitions, so be it. But when we made our scores, we made sure that every team knew that the scores they were given were based completely on their dance, completely on what happened on stage, nothing to do with what happened backstage or what happened in the audience. None of that, right? So the scores are fair. The scores reflect that. Granted, my personal opinion, if what I heard was true, I would have disqualified some of these teams. But then again, it was all word of mouth. But we can't really do much. It was all just collateral damage from the previous competition. Teams are mad. Teams gave ultimatums. Some teams left. Some teams, no, sorry, some teams didn't leave, but some teams threatened to leave. And then ultimately, we had a speech at the end of the day in the auditorium that sort of explained, you know, this isn't right. You're ruining Bhangra. You're ruining for the rest of us. I think the biggest problem came from the parents, not more so the kids itself. Correct me if I'm wrong, right? But the parents are the ones that made these claims and started the fights or whatever it may be. Um, because of that, we had to cancel placings, because if we had done placings, it would have become like it would have been dangerous. I think in the end, what we did was the best option, and it kept everybody safe.
So, again, just for anybody who's unaware, essentially what happened, everybody seemed to have been mad from the previous competition, and those feelings seem to have spilled over into Bhangra City's competition, um, because of alleged threats and like talking backstage. Essentially, I agree with what the comp directors did, but they basically said, like, listen, it's clearly not safe to have the placings held in person on stage. We do not want to repeat what happened last night, and everybody's feelings getting completely riled up. So we're not gonna have. So they decided to not have placings in person, and they just announced the placings to the teams. Is that correct?
So we announced it to captains of each. So it wasn't even teams. Yeah. I think the only thing that I really want to say on this topic is going forth, and even to the teams that were at our comp, it's important to let our egos aside for future comps. I know I know when you're at a comp and you feel like it's rigged, it's kind of like you see tunnel vision, but the comp committee didn't deserve everything they had to deal with that day. We definitely we didn't deserve to deal with everything that happened from the judges the night before. You have a panel of 5 new judges, you have a whole new committee and a whole new lineup. So it's not fair to the teams that didn't compete at Bhangra World Cup either. They were robbed of their experience. We are the examples for these kids, these junior teams that go to competitions. And once we're done, they're the ones that are going to be carrying it on. So we have to be teaching them more than what we're doing right now. It's not just about getting mad and bullying little kids and doing what we want to do. Set a good example for your kids. Come to comps, make friends, because we all got the chance to do that as well. So that's really it. Just be appreciative of the committees that are throwing these competitions for you. And if you have an issue, deal with it with the committee of the comp that you went to, not collateral damage at a different comp.
Yeah, sure. I can kind of touch base on that topic as well. I think, man, so many different things are coming to mind because when that competition happened Saturday, I'm getting my bone blown up left and right from, folks that I know competing there and things, all these things are happening. And, I will say, speaking on Saturday, Bhangra World Cup, what happened there, I don't know the level of detail, but as far as I do know, if what they said is true in terms of people, being shady around scores and teams that were supposed to placed and all these things happen, that's really, honestly speaking, disturbing because you have these teams and really it's the kids that are coming in, putting in crazy amounts, months of work, and they're just getting played. And then what they start to feel is that this is the norm, that this is what Bhangra is. And at one point back in the day, that's what it was. That's how it used to be. And in some places, back home in Punjab, it is still like that. You can get by knowing people. That's the sad truth. But to see it here at such a high level, I feel like it just sucks. It just really sucks. And then the next day, all that energy comes and it gets put onto the committee. It doesn't deserve that as these guys said as well. But at the end of the day, when we talk to these guys and we talk to these teams and we talk about, what was going on, what was going through their head, everybody is liable. Everybody is at fault that stood there and allowed any of those actions to happen. And I will blatantly say that. I said it very bluntly to everybody that day as well. If you stood there and you allowed those actions to take place, you are just as much as fault for being a bystander, right? You need to be proactive about this. Why? And the biggest reason is this. This is what the next generation, this is what they're learning. This is what they're seeing, right? And don't get me wrong, when we compete, right, we go on stage, it's literally, it's fuck everybody else. We're here to compete. But when you get off that stage, there's a certain level of respect and certain level of just admiration, the way you hold yourself for those folks around you. Because at the end of the day, you all are representing something much larger than you. You're representing your culture. When you listen to a live set, it's that's what Punjab is represented in so many levels. That's our culture. And we need to figure out a way to better value that and not get involved in these politics. So that was essentially what we had told the captains. We had told them, and this was my request to them was go back and I don't care how young the kids are, but tell them the truth. Tell them what happened, why it happened. They need to be informed so they can understand moving forward. This is wrong. They should be able to identify very clearly what's wrong and what's right. And that's really it at the end of the day, right? Being able to identify it, just be better, be better, be better, be better. And that's all I can say.
I think most of it's been said, but it was a little disappointing because I remember being in the circuit when we started and like 2006 to like 2014, 15. And we always used to be like, it's these uncles, and now suddenly 90% of the uncles have retired. So now these academies are being run by like Canadian, American, born and raised people. And it's very unfortunate that we're doing the exact same thing that we used to, be irritated about what these uncles doing. It's very unfortunate that these kids are being taught that, hey, if we don't like the placing, or if we think the placings, I don't know, were rigged or whatever it was, that we have the right to go and bully these teams. I thought that these maybe I've just been here for a very long time, but I know these kids, and I call them kids. Like, I always call Summit the kid because I've known him since he was 14, 15, and and it's like I always used to be like, oh, they're kids, and they're being taught what to do and what not to do about their academies. But now these kids are now 30 years old, and I kind of see like this whole cycle repeating itself. So, um, being from the circuit, I mean, yeah, in Vancouver, where both of these competitions happened, the Vancouver circuit has always just had a reputation for like, competitions not being judged correctly and things like that. And it was very nice to see Bhangra City as one of those competitions that was like up and coming, where they were very adamant on having like a solid judging panel, and they had a solid judging panel last year and this year. We used to have another competition here called Bhangra Elite, and this year was the first year that like I was happy with the panel, and that competition's been around for like 8 years. So I understood where the teams were coming from. The teams wanted to take a stand. They wanted a competition to support them and be like, hey, we cannot allow these things to happen in our Vancouver circuit, which we are trying so hard to improve. But unfortunately, the time, the place, the day, the event was all incorrect. The way it was done was all incorrect. And once again, like, this is just all word of mouth, but, just from, like, the things that have come my way and stuff, it's like, I get it being from the Vancouver circuit, but at the same time, it wasn't done right, and that's just very unfortunate. Because I don't want a 12-year-old today or a 14-year-old today being like, "Yeah, remember, like, that competition was rigged, and the next day, like, our coaches went and just bullied them and caused crap." Like, that kid's also gonna be 30 one day and running this academy. So, that's kind of where I'm coming from.
All right. Well, y'all, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, clearing the air, and also just talking about the actual competition and everything that dancing that happened, because that's all we're here for. All right. Thank you all for listening to another episode of the Bhangra Podcast. Like I said earlier, best way you can help us out is to support us on Patreon and, get a friend to do so as well. You can also subscribe to us on YouTube and, follow us on our TikTok and Instagram, and also join our Discord server to just generally talk with the rest of the circuit about Bhangra. Link to all those are in the description. Deuces.